Your absence is teaching him what your presence never cooled. There comes a moment in every relationship, every connection, every bond, where your presence becomes so constant that it becomes invisible, where your effort is expected, where your love is assumed, where your loyalty is taken for granted. And when that moment arrives, you face a choice. Do you keep pouring into someone who no longer feels the weight of what you give? Or do you step back and let life do the teaching? Because here's the truth: your absence teaches accountability. Your absence teaches appreciation. Your absence teaches the value of your energy. Your absence teaches what your presence alone never could. When you remove yourself, you remove the comfort. You remove the safety net. You remove the certainty that you'll always stay, no matter how casually you're treated. There is a strange truth about human behavior. The more consistently you show up for someone, the more they start to believe that your presence is permanent, guaranteed, and unconditional. They grow accustomed to your support, your love, your loyalty, your check-ins, your comfort, until all the things you once offered as gifts begin to blend into the background of their daily life. It isn't that your presence becomes less valuable, it is that it becomes less noticeable. When someone believes you will always be there, they stop looking closely at what you bring to their life. They stop appreciating your effort because they confuse consistency with obligation. And over time, the emotional weight you carry becomes invisible. The kind of invisible that hurts because you know how much it costs you to give what they've started to take for granted. In every relationship, romantic or otherwise, people adjust to the rhythm you create. If you are always the one initiating the conversations, the one planning the time together, the one checking in, or the one holding the emotional stability, the other person eventually stops feeling the need to match that energy. They stop noticing the work because they never have to exert it themselves. What once was generous becomes expected. What once was intentional becomes routine. And what once felt special becomes overlooked. Your presence becomes part of the scenery. Always there, always ready, always giving. And in the comfort of that pattern, the other person forgets that your presence is a choice, not a responsibility. That is where the shift begins. When you step back, when you stop being the one who always compensates, always fixes, always reaches out first, something changes in the atmosphere. Distance is not merely physical space. It is an interruption of habit. It breaks the pattern that someone has become numb to. When your presence is constant, it becomes predictable. But when your presence suddenly becomes absent, it becomes undeniably noticeable. The conversations they expected don't arrive. The attention they assumed was theirs stops flowing. The emotional support that cushioned them is no longer there to fall back on. And in that quiet space, clarity emerges. Distance restores clarity because it forces the other person to confront what your presence truly meant. When they no longer have access to your comfort, they begin to understand the role it played. When your encouragement is gone, they feel the emptiness where your voice used to lift them. When your reliability disappears, they feel the instability of their own neglect. It is only then that they realize what they were receiving. They see the difference between life with your presence and life without it. Absence has a way of sharpening perception. It turns the blur of routine into the sharp outline of appreciation. It forces them to see what they ignored, and it forces them to feel what they dismissed. And here is the deeper truth: distance does not only restore clarity in the other person, it restores clarity in you as well. You begin to see the truth of the connection more clearly. You notice how much you were carrying. You see how uneven the emotional labor had become. You recognize how much peace returns when you are no longer overextending yourself. You reconnect with who you are without the weight of constant giving. Distance helps you evaluate whether the relationship nourished you or drained you. It shows you the cost of your presence and the liberation of your absence. It allows you to see, without denial or excuses, whether the other person is willing to step up now that you are no longer stepping in. Distance is not just a lesson for them, it is a revelation for you. Ultimately, presence becomes invisible not because it is small, but because it is abundant. People overlook what they assume will always be available. But when you give yourself permission to step back, to pause, to hold your energy instead of constantly offering it, something powerful happens. Value returns, respect returns, awareness returns. The other person must now decide whether your absence motivates them to change or exposes the truth of what they never intended to give. And in that space of silence and separation, clarity rises for both of you. Your presence becomes visible again, not because you returned to prove it, but because stepping back allowed the truth to finally be seen. There are lessons people will never learn while you are still giving them the comfort of your constant presence. As long as you are available, supportive, and forgiving, many will never fully grasp the depth of what you offer. Appreciation requires contrast, a before and after, a with and without. When someone has never experienced the absence of your care, your love, or your attention, they have no reference point for how valuable those things truly were. They become accustomed to the ease of receiving without reflecting on what it costs you to give. Your presence becomes a familiar warmth in their life, and familiarity has a way of numbing people to gratitude. But the moment you step away, even slightly, the temperature shifts, and suddenly the absence of what they took for granted becomes unmistakable. In that space of distance, a person begins to recognize the details they once ignored, the good morning messages that always made the start of their day a little brighter, the late night reassurance that calmed their fears, the consistency that anchored them when everything else felt uncertain. When these gestures disappear, the emptiness left behind becomes a teacher. And absence is a far stricter teacher than presence ever could be. It doesn't repeat itself. It doesn't negotiate. It simply reveals truths. It shows the other person exactly what your presence contributed by allowing them to feel its disappearance. And that's when appreciation begins to grow. Not because they suddenly changed, but because they finally noticed what was always there. Absence also teaches accountability. When you are always the one showing up, the other person never has to examine their behavior. They don't question whether they are giving enough, trying enough, or choosing you the way you choose them. They don't have to face the consequences of their neglect, because your presence protects them from it. But when you step back even a little, they must confront the role they played in pushing you toward distance. They have to sit with the silence they created. They have to feel the consequences of their own inconsistency. This is where accountability begins, in the realization that effort was required of them too, and they failed to provide it. Absence forces them to see the imbalance they denied and the responsibility they avoided. And then comes emotional awareness, the most uncomfortable of the lessons absence delivers. When someone can no longer lean on you, they are forced to feel their own emotions without your cushioning. They feel the worry, the confusion, the regret, the longing that they never expected to experience because they assumed you would always be there. Emotional awareness isn't born from comfort. It's born from disruption. Your absence disrupts their emotional routine, forcing them to process feelings they never had to confront before. They become more aware of the connection, more aware of their own actions, and more aware of the consequences of not valuing what they had. It is only in your distance that they begin to understand the emotional impact you had on their life. But what makes absence such a powerful teacher is not just what it reveals, it's how it transforms. Appreciation grows deeper because it comes from reflection, not convenience. Accountability becomes unavoidable because silence leaves no one else to blame. And emotional awareness expands because feelings that were once drowned out by routine now echo with clarity. Absence cleans the emotional lens. It strips away distractions and excuses. It forces honesty, the kind that cannot be softened by your presence or comforted by your reassurance. People feel the weight of reality when they do not have you to soften it. And in that weight, they finally understand the depth of your value. Absence does not just teach them about you, it teaches them about themselves. It exposes whether they are capable of growth or only regret. It reveals whether they appreciate you enough to change or simply enough to miss you. It separates those who valued your presence from those who only valued your convenience. And it shows them with undeniable clarity that love, support, and loyalty are not infinite resources. They require reciprocity, effort, and care. Your distance becomes the mirror they cannot look away from, reflecting everything they ignored when your presence felt guaranteed. Stepping back is one of the hardest decisions a person can make, especially when your heart is involved. You don't step back because you want to hurt someone. You don't step back because you want to teach a harsh lesson. You step back because something inside you finally recognizes that your peace matters. Your energy matters. Your emotional well-being matters. There comes a moment when giving more starts to feel like losing yourself, and you reach a point where you can no longer keep sacrificing your boundaries for someone who doesn't honor your effort. Choosing distance is not an act of cruelty. It is an act of survival. It is the moment you choose yourself in a situation where the other person never truly chose you with the same depth and consistency. Most people misunderstand what stepping back truly means. They assume it is a reaction to anger or disappointment, but it's not. It is a quiet decision made after countless internal conversations. It is the result of noticing patterns, feeling drained, and realizing that the connection has become one-sided. You don't step back impulsively. You step back when you've given enough chances, enough reassurance, enough forgiveness, and enough emotional labor to last a lifetime. There is nothing vengeful about it. In fact, stepping back comes from love for yourself. It is the recognition that you deserve a relationship or connection where your effort is matched, your emotions are understood, and your value is seen without needing to prove it over and over again. And yet, to the person on the receiving end, your decision may feel like punishment because they were relying on your presence to compensate for their lack of effort. They may interpret your withdrawal as anger when in reality it is clarity. They may assume you are trying to make them chase you when the truth is you finally realized you shouldn't have to chase anyone just to be valued. Your distance exposes what they've failed to offer, but that exposure is not intentional. It's simply the byproduct of no longer carrying the weight they placed on you. When someone has grown comfortable with your effort, your step back can feel like a shock, but the shock is not meant to hurt them. It is meant to protect you. Stepping back is self-respect because it requires acknowledging your worth even when someone else doesn't. It means recognizing that love or connection should never demand self-abandonment. It means choosing boundaries over emotional exhaustion, peace over chaos, and dignity over blind loyalty. Self-respect is expressed not only in what you allow, but in what you no longer tolerate. And stepping back is the most powerful expression of that truth. You stop over-explaining. You stop over-giving. You stop showing up for someone who only notices you when you fade. You choose yourself in a way that you may have avoided for too long. The world often romanticizes holding on, but true strength is sometimes found in letting go just enough to breathe again. Stepping back doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop sacrificing yourself for someone who won't meet you halfway. It means you stop performing emotional labor for a person who doesn't reciprocate. It means you stop giving second chances to someone who didn't earn the first one. It's not about making them feel your absence. It's about freeing yourself from the pressure of carrying the entire connection on your shoulders. Your heart needs room to rest, your mind needs space to reset, and your spirit needs the chance to feel whole again. Distance creates that space, and stepping back becomes the doorway to rediscovering your strength. And perhaps the most important truth is this: stepping back allows you to see the relationship without emotional fog. It shows you their true character. Whether they step forward to meet you or whether they let the distance grow. It reveals whether they respected your presence or merely relied on it. It uncovers whether they valued you or only valued the benefits of having you around. In that quiet distance, you learn not only about them, but about yourself. You learn what you need, what you deserve, and what you can no longer compromise. Stepping back is not punishment. It is protection. It is reclamation. It is the moment you place your dignity above your desire to be chosen, proving to yourself that you are willing to walk away from anything that costs you your peace. There is a truth many people avoid because accepting it demands change. Your energy is not infinite. Your kindness, your time, your presence, your heart, these are all resources that require effort, intention, and emotional investment. Yet too often, you pour these precious parts of yourself into people who do not recognize the value of what they are receiving. You give and give, hoping that eventually the other person will understand your worth. But energy given to the wrong person doesn't transform them. It slowly drains you. When someone fails to appreciate what you bring, you begin to feel the quiet ache of being unseen. That ache grows louder with every effort that goes unnoticed, with every moment of care that goes unreturned, and with every piece of your heart that is handed over without acknowledgement. Your energy shapes your life. It influences your peace of mind, your emotional balance, and your sense of self-worth. When you invested in someone who does not reciprocate, it slowly reshapes you into a version of yourself that is tired, doubtful, and overstretched. You begin to question your own value, not because you lack it, but because you keep offering it to someone who refuses to recognize it. The problem is not your depth, it's the person who cannot swim in it. People who undervalue your energy do not do so because it is small. They do so because they lack the capacity to appreciate something that requires emotional maturity. And the more you give to the wrong person, the more you teach them that your effort is optional and your presence is guaranteed. One of the most profound realizations you will ever experience is understanding that energy is not just something you offer, it's something you protect. When you stop guarding your energy, people learn to treat it like it is disposable. But when you begin to understand the weight of your effort, you stop giving it away casually. You stop offering your heart to people who do not honor it. You stop sacrificing your peace for someone who cannot meet you where you are. Protecting your energy means acknowledging that not everyone deserves access to your softness, your patience, your wisdom, or your love. It is not selfish to withhold those things from someone who cannot appreciate them. It is necessary. When your energy is undervalued, your spirit begins to dim. You become exhausted not because you are weak, but because you are overextended. The emotional imbalance becomes impossible to ignore. You start to feel like you are working alone, emotionally, mentally, and sometimes physically. And that sense of isolation, even in someone's presence, is one of the clearest signs that your energy is being given to the wrong place. You cannot force someone to appreciate you. You cannot convince them of your worth. You cannot make someone value something they have grown comfortable taking. Appreciation is not something you teach by giving more. It is something a person develops when they realize what they stand to lose. Choosing where to place your energy is one of the most powerful acts of self-respect. When you redirect it towards spaces that pour back into you, you will feel the shift immediately. Peace replaces anxiety. Clarity replaces confusion. Reciprocity replaces effort without reward. The right connections do not drain you, they fuel you. The right people do not expect you to give endlessly. They meet you halfway because they understand the value of your presence. When your energy is honored, you don't feel like you're competing for attention or loyalty. You feel seen, understood, and respected. That kind of balance is only possible when you stop giving your energy to those who were never ready to receive it. And when you finally pull your energy back from places where it has been neglected, something powerful happens inside you. You begin to heal, you begin to rebuild. You begin to remember your worth. You feel your strength returning, your confidence rising, and your identity re-centering. Distance from undervalued spaces creates room for growth, room for peace, room for the love and appreciation you once hoped to find in the wrong place. Your energy becomes a gift again, not a burden you're begging someone to notice. And with that shift, you learn that giving your energy is not the problem. Giving it to the wrong person is. There comes a moment when walking away stops feeling like loss and starts feeling like alignment. At first, the thought terrifies you, leaving behind what you've gotten used to, stepping out of a connection you tried so hard to sustain, choosing distance where your heart once chose closeness. But beneath that fear lies a quiet, powerful truth. Sometimes the door you are afraid to close is the very door blocking the life you truly deserve. Leaving is not always about giving up. Sometimes walking away is the only path that leads you toward the version of your life that matches your worth. And once you step beyond the emotional weight that kept you stuck, you begin to see how much higher your life rises when you stop anchoring yourself to places that kept you sinking. People often underestimate how much emotional heaviness comes from staying in the wrong environment. You might not realize it at first. The constant disappointment, the subtle neglect, the quiet disrespect, the inconsistency you try to rationalize, all of that slowly dims your energy. You shrink yourself to maintain peace. You silence your needs to avoid conflict. You carry the responsibility of the relationship alone because you're afraid that walking away means failing. But staying somewhere you're undervalued is the real failure, not to them, but to yourself. When you finally choose to walk away, you remove the emotional noise that kept you doubting your worth, and in the newfound silence, you rediscover your clarity. That clarity becomes the gateway to elevation because you can finally hear yourself again. Walking away creates space, the kind of space you didn't even realize you needed. As long as you remain tied to someone who drains you, you have no capacity left for people who would actually see your value. Life cannot fill hands that refuse to let go. Better opportunities cannot reach a heart that is occupied with the wrong attachment. Better people cannot enter a space that someone undeserving is already occupying. When you release what isn't meant for you, you make room for what is. The universe responds to your courage, new connections, unexpected blessings, and meaningful relationships begin to reveal themselves, not because you forced them, but because you finally allowed room for them to exist. And the shift is not only external, it's internal. The moment you walk away from something that diminished you, you begin to rise into someone stronger, wiser, and more self-aware. Your self-respect expands. Your confidence strengthens. You begin to see your own value more clearly because you're no longer trying to convince someone else to see it. You start prioritizing peace over chaos, emotional balance over emotional labor, and reciprocity over exhaustion. Walking away becomes transformational because it redefines the standards you hold for your life. It teaches you that you are allowed to leave anything that makes you feel small. And once you learn that, you elevate not only your circumstances, but your entire sense of self. With time, you start noticing how different life feels when you're no longer weighed down. Decisions come easier. Your mind feels lighter. You have more mental space for your dreams, your goals, and your purpose. You no longer wake up wondering if someone will appreciate you. You wake up with the freedom to appreciate yourself. Better people begin to appear, people who recognize your worth without needing to lose you first. People who don't take your presence for granted. People who match your energy instead of consuming it. When you align yourself with environments that uplift you, you no longer settle for connections that require you to shrink to fit. The elevation begins within you and reflects in everything around you. And the beauty is this: walking away doesn't just change your relationships, it changes your entire direction. New opportunities emerge because your mind is no longer clouded by emotional turmoil. You think more clearly, choose more intentionally, and move with more certainty. You attract better because you carry yourself like someone who knows they deserve better. Walking away becomes a catalyst for growth, a declaration of worth, and a turning point that sets your life on a higher path. It opens doors you never knew existed, doors that were always meant for you, but that you couldn't reach while staying tied to something that held you down. There are moments in life when words simply lose their power. You can explain how you feel, express your needs, voice your concerns, and still watch someone dismiss or minimize everything you're trying to say. You can argue, you can plead, you can repeat the same truth over and over again, but if a person is determined not to hear you, your voice becomes background noise. That is why absence becomes so powerful, because silence cannot be ignored the way your words were. Your absence cannot be debated, denied, or dismissed. It is a message that speaks for you, a message stronger than anything you could say out loud. When you remove yourself, your silence becomes the lesson that forces someone to confront the reality they avoided while you were still present. Absence carries a weight that presence sometimes cannot deliver. When you were there, they felt secure. They assumed you would stay, even if they didn't change, even if they didn't try, even if they didn't match your effort. But when you step back, the emotional landscape shifts. The comfort they used to lean on disappears. The certainty they relied on evaporates. The routine they took for granted becomes a void they cannot fill. And suddenly, they are left with the one thing they never expected to face: the consequences of their own behavior. Your absence becomes the teacher that steps in when patience steps out. It delivers the message they refuse to hear, not with anger, but with truth. Distance has a way of exposing emotional realities that people try to avoid. When you are always available, they never have to ask themselves what life would feel like without you. They never have to examine how deeply they depend on your presence. But when you pull away, they are confronted with the undeniable truth that access to you was never guaranteed. They feel the shift immediately. The lack of your attention, the missing reassurance, the space where your support once existed. In that space, emotions rise to the surface that they never allowed themselves to feel before. Regret, longing, insecurity, awareness, it all comes rushing in. Your absence becomes a mirror, reflecting what they overlooked and illuminating what they should have cherished. And the lesson hits harder because there is no one left to blame. In your presence, they could blame your reactions. They could blame the conversation. They could blame the moment. But in your absence, they have to look inward. They have to face the choices they made. They have to acknowledge the effort they refused to give. They must confront the truth that losing your presence wasn't something you did to them. It was something they did to themselves. Absence forces responsibility. It forces emotional growth. It forces a person to recognize the weight of your presence because they now feel the weight of its loss. The most powerful shift happens when your absence reveals what your presence tried so hard to show. You may have spent months or years trying to get them to understand your needs, to appreciate your effort, to value your heart. But sometimes love blinds people to the reality of their behavior. They incorrectly assume that your consistency means you'll never leave. But your absence shatters that illusion instantly. The moment you step back, the lesson becomes unavoidable. What they once ignored becomes all they can think about. What they once dismissed becomes what they now miss. Your absence becomes the message they cannot forget, the discomfort they cannot escape, and the awareness they cannot undo. And though absence teaches them, it teaches you even more. You begin to realize how powerful your presence truly was. You see that your silence carries weight. You understand that you do not have to fight for someone to value you. Your absence will show them everything your words couldn't. You understand that stepping back doesn't make you weak. It makes you wise. It allows you to observe who reaches out, who steps up, and who never deserved access to you in the first place. And with every moment of distance, you grow stronger. You learn that your presence was never the problem. The real issue was giving it to someone who needed to feel your absence to understand your worth. At some point, you have to understand this. Your presence is a privilege, not a promise. Your energy is a gift, not a guarantee. Your heart is a treasure, not something to be borrowed and forgotten. The moment you choose to step back, the moment you choose silence over struggle, the moment you choose peace over proving yourself, that's the moment your life begins to shift. Some people will wake up and realize what they lost. Others will watch you walk away and still not understand why. But none of that changes the truth. Your absence will teach the lesson your presence never could. And as you rise, you'll see that the people meant for you will never require you to shrink, to beg, to chase, or to break yourself in half to be understood. They will recognize your worth without needing to lose you first. They will meet your effort, honor your heart, and value your presence in ways you never had to ask for. So walk forward, lift your head, keep your spirit intact, because sometimes the most powerful thing you can ever do is simply stop showing up for the places that never showed up for you.